The wail of medical alarms pierced through the hushed luxury of the private hospital suite. Machines beeped frantically as nurses rushed around, their pristine white uniforms blurring under the sterile glow of overhead lights. The walls gleamed with polished marble, a testament to wealth that could buy everything, except peace. On the oversized hospital bed, surrounded by wires and blinking monitors, lay Sophia Anderson, only 8 years old but already frail like glass. Her chest heaved shallowly, every breath sounding like a battle. Sweat slicked her pale forehead as her small fingers clutched weakly at the sheets. Beside her stood her father, Richard Anderson, billionaire tycoon, hailed as one of the richest men in America. His Italian suit, custom-tailored to perfection, hung stiffly on his broad frame, but tonight it did not make him look powerful. Tonight, it only made him look smaller. His jaw was clenched, his hand gripping the rail of his daughter's bed until his knuckles turned bone white. "Do something," he barked, his voice thunderous, slicing through the quiet desperation of the staff. "You're supposed to be the best, the best. Why is she still suffering?" The chief physician stepped forward, glasses glinting under the light. "Sir, we've tried every available treatment. Every new medication, every specialist consultation, nothing has worked." His voice wavered. "Her body isn't responding. We've reached the limits of medicine." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Limits? He had built empires on the idea that limits were only illusions. He was a man who could buy anything, command anyone, reshape industries with a phone call. Yet here, in this glittering hospital wing he had practically purchased for his daughter, he was utterly powerless. He turned toward Sophia, his hard exterior cracking. "Stay with me, baby," he whispered, stroking her damp hair. His voice trembled, something no board member, no competitor, had ever heard. "Daddy's here. Daddy's going to fix this." But deep inside, fear twisted in his chest. Outside the glass doors, the media swarmed like vultures. Headlines already splashed across the internet. "Billionaire's fortune can't save his dying daughter. All the money in the world, still helpless. Sophia Anderson's tragedy exposes human limits." Richard's empire was crumbling under scrutiny. Shareholders whispered about his obsession with his daughter, his distraction from business. Competitors circled like sharks. And yet, none of it mattered compared to the sight of Sophia's labored breathing. "Sir," a nurse whispered urgently, drawing his attention back. "We need to stabilize her again." The billionaire stepped back, helpless, as they swarmed around his daughter. His mind screamed, "There must be a way. There must be something left I haven't tried." Beyond the flashing cameras and the wall of bodyguards stood a girl who didn't belong. Amara. She was small, no more than 10, with braids tied unevenly and a faded cloth bag clutched to her chest. Her clothes hung loose, worn thin from years of hand-me-downs. She looked like she could have been swallowed whole by the towering glass hospital behind her. Yet her eyes didn't waver. While the reporters shouted questions about billion-dollar treatments and miracle drugs, Amara whispered something no microphone caught. A quiet hum, a half-lullaby, half-prayer, the same tune she had sung over her baby brother's frail body years ago. And in the window above, where Sophia Anderson lay fighting for air, the child stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. Just for a moment, her ragged breathing seemed to ease. The nurses inside missed it. The billionaire at her bedside didn't notice. But Amara did. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, whispering again, louder this time. "I can help her." Security moved fast, blocking her path. "Back off, kid. This isn't your place." But Amara's voice rose, trembling but unshakable. "She heard me. I know she did. Let me in." The crowd laughed. Reporters scribbled about another crazy claim. The guards waved her away like a stray. But Amara stood her ground, her small frame silhouetted against the floodlights. Her words cut through the chaos, defiant, desperate, burning with conviction. What if I'm the only one who can save her? Inside, unaware of the storm brewing at the gates, Sophia let out another broken cry. Richard Anderson flinched as though struck. And at that moment, fate began weaving its threads. The poor black girl with nothing but determination in her eyes, and the billionaire father drowning in helplessness. Two worlds on a collision course. And one question burned in the minds of all who witnessed. Far away from the marble hospital and flashing cameras, the streets looked different. Cracked sidewalks, graffiti-covered walls, and flickering street lamps painted a harsher picture of reality. This was where Amara came from. She lived in a small, crumbling apartment tucked inside one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. The hallway smelled of damp plaster and fried food, doors rattled on weak hinges, and sirens wailed in the distance every night. Yet within that fragile world, Amara carried something no one else did: hope. Her grandmother, Mama Ruth, raised her after her parents had died in an accident years before. The old woman's hands were bent from arthritis, but her spirit was unbroken. She told Amara stories every night, stories of faith, courage, and a kind of healing that came not just from medicine but from compassion and spirit. Amara grew up listening, watching, learning. She remembered kneeling by her little brother, who had once lain sick in the very same way Sophia now did. Doctors had dismissed him, calling it a lost case. Mama Ruth had done everything she could with roots, herbs, and whispered prayers. But in the end, his tiny body had not survived. Amara had never forgotten the way his hand had slipped out of hers. She had been only 7 then. Too young to save him, too young to even understand why the world let such things happen. But she had promised herself through her tears, never again. If I see another child in that kind of pain, I won't just stand by. Her neighbors called her gifted, the little girl with healing hands. When babies cried, Amara's songs soothed them. When older neighbors complained of pain, she pressed on certain spots until they sighed with relief. It wasn't magic. It was attention, patience, and a strange instinct she couldn't explain. At school, her teachers admired her sharp mind but worried about her future. Poverty weighed heavy, sometimes she came hungry, sometimes her clothes didn't fit. But no hardship ever dimmed the light in her eyes. The night before she appeared at the hospital, she sat by Mama Ruth's side. The old woman was coughing, her breath shallow. Their rent was overdue. The medicine they needed was too expensive. But when Amara heard the news on a neighbor's radio, about the billionaire's sick daughter, something inside her stirred. "This is your sign," Mama Ruth said weakly, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. "Go, child. Take what you know, what God gave you, and don't be afraid. Maybe that little girl needs you." So Amara had packed her bag, kissed her grandmother's forehead, and walked across the city toward the hospital where destiny waited. Meanwhile, in a towering skyscraper that bore his name, Richard Anderson had once ruled like a king. He was feared in boardrooms, admired in newspapers, envied by rivals. Every handshake meant millions, every decision rippled through industries. But that power meant nothing now. Since Sophia's illness had taken hold, Richard's empire had started to fracture. He missed meetings. He canceled deals. His mind was consumed by hospital corridors instead of stock charts. Investors whispered that he was losing his edge. Journalists wrote that grief was making him reckless. At home, the silence was louder than the ticking of clocks. His wife had left years ago, unable to handle his cold ambition. Sophia was all he had left. She was his heir, his heart, his proof that there was something in this world more valuable than wealth. He had hired the best doctors money could find, flown in specialists from across the globe, purchased machines that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. But still, Sophia grew weaker. And Richard, for all his billions, could not bear the sight of her suffering. In the hospital, he paced the halls at night, tie loosened, face shadowed with exhaustion. Nurses whispered about how he never left her side, how this iron-hearted man had become a ghost of himself. But in public, Richard wore his mask. He snapped at doctors. He barked at journalists. He sneered at shareholders. He clung to pride because pride was all he had left. Two worlds, impossibly far apart, were being drawn together. Amara, the girl from the slums, carrying nothing but her faith, her instincts, and a fierce determination born from loss. Richard Anderson, the billionaire with everything except the one thing he needed most, a cure for his daughter. The threads of their lives were weaving tighter. Inside her hospital bed, Sophia whimpered again. She was so small, her body lost among the wires and machines. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with fever, and she whispered a single word that no one understood. Outside, under the harsh glow of security floodlights, Amara pressed her small hand against the cold glass. Her voice cut through the night, carrying more conviction than the shouting reporters, more certainty than the doctors inside. I can help her. And though no one believed it yet, destiny was already shifting. The hospital lobby buzzed like a hive of whispers and flashing cameras. Reporters pressed forward, microphones stretched toward the glass doors while bodyguards kept them at bay. And through that chaos came Amara. Her small frame slipped past the crowd until she stood at the very front, clutching her faded bag. Her braids were damp with sweat, her shoes scuffed from the long walk across the city. She looked nothing like someone who belonged in a place where the walls were made of marble and the air smelled of polished steel. Please, she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Let me see her. The guards barely glanced at her. Move along, kid. This isn't a playground. I can help her, Amara repeated, louder this time. Your doctors can't, but I can. A ripple of laughter moved through the reporters. Did you hear that? One scoffed. The billionaire's daughter is dying, and a street girl thinks she's the answer. Cameras clicked, capturing her face, half pity, half ridicule. But Amara didn't flinch. Her eyes burned with a conviction that silenced even the chuckles. Please, she begged. Just one chance. Richard Anderson paced at the foot of Sophia's bed, his jaw tight as the machines beeped in unsteady rhythm. His daughter's breathing rattled like broken glass. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. His head snapped up, and one of his bodyguards stepped in, uncomfortable. Sir, there's a child outside. She says she can help. Richard's brows knitted. A child? Yes, sir. She claims she knows what's wrong with your daughter. For a moment, Richard stared in disbelief, then a bitter laugh escaped him. Do you hear yourself? My daughter has been examined by the top specialists in the world. The world. And you bring me a beggar child? His voice dripped with scorn. The guard hesitated. She's persistent, sir. Won't leave. Get rid of her, Richard snapped. I don't need circus acts parading through here. Minutes later, the doors swung open and Amara was pushed inside by the guards, struggling against their grip. I just need to see her. She cried. Richard's eyes flared in fury. What is this? Who let her in? Sir, she wouldn't leave. Then throw her out. But Amara planted her feet, eyes locking on Sophia's fragile figure. Please, Mr. Anderson. I know you don't believe me. But I've seen this before. I can help her. Her voice cracked, but her determination did not. Richard stormed toward her, towering over her small frame. Do you think this is a joke? My daughter's life is not a game for street children to play with. Get out. The doctors muttered their agreement. One sneered under his breath, ridiculous. This is what desperation invites. Amara's cheeks flushed with shame, but she lifted her chin. You think I'm nothing. You think because I don't have money, I can't know things you don't. But look at her. She pointed at Sophia. She's slipping away. You've all given up, haven't you? The room went still. The doctors bristled. Richard's nostrils flared. "How dare you," he began. And then it happened. From the bed came a faint sound. A whisper, a weak cry. Sophia's eyelids fluttered, her small hand trembling as it lifted from the sheets. Slowly, painfully, she reached, not for her father, not for the nurses, but for Amara. Everyone froze. The little girl's fingers stretched out, quivering in the air as if seeking the sound of Amara's voice. Richard's anger faltered, replaced by something else: shock, confusion, fear. "No," he murmured. He hurried to his daughter's side, grasping her tiny hand. "Sophia, it's Daddy. I'm right here." But her hand slipped from his and pointed weakly again, toward Amara. Gasps rippled around the room. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances. Amara stepped forward slowly, her voice soft but steady. "She hears me. She knows I can help." Richard's face twisted in turmoil. Pride clashed with desperation. For the first time, the fortress of his certainty cracked. "She doesn't need you," he snapped, though his voice wavered. "She's confused. She's weak." But Sophia whimpered, her lips forming a single word that made the entire room shudder. "Her." Richard's heart dropped into his stomach. He turned, locking eyes with Amara. The room seemed to hold its breath. Doctors shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. Reporters outside pressed harder against the glass, cameras flashing. Richard's pride screamed to throw the girl out. To crush the absurd notion that his billions had failed but this nobody might succeed. And yet, his daughter's hand still reached toward Amara. "Please," Amara whispered. "Just let me try." The billionaire stood frozen, torn between fury and fear, between pride and the unshakable love he held for the little girl gasping before him. At last, he gave a bitter laugh, hollow and broken. "Fine. Do your little trick. And when you fail, you'll see what happens when you give a desperate man false hope." Amara didn't flinch. She walked slowly to Sophia's bedside, her small hand brushing the child's forehead, her voice humming that same soft tune she had sung outside the window. And for the first time in hours, Sophia's frantic breathing began to ease. The monitors steadied. Her trembling stopped. Her eyelids fluttered, and she leaned into Amara's touch with a faint sigh. The room erupted in gasps. Richard stumbled back, shock etched into every line of his face. And in that instant, the impossible became undeniable. The room was frozen in stunned silence. The beeping machines no longer screamed in alarm. Sophia's breathing, though still shallow, had steadied under Amara's touch. Doctors exchanged uneasy glances. Nurses whispered in disbelief. And Richard Anderson, a man who had stared down governments and toppled corporations, stood speechless. Finally, one of the doctors broke the silence. That was a coincidence," he said sharply, as though convincing himself. "A temporary stabilization. Nothing more." But Richard wasn't so sure. He had been watching his daughter fade for weeks, had seen every false dawn vanish as quickly as it came. This felt different. He turned sharply toward Amara. "What did you do?" Amara didn't shrink from his glare. "I didn't give up," she said simply. "That's all." Her words struck him harder than he expected. For the next hour, Richard allowed Amara to remain at Sophia's bedside, though under the sharp eyes of doctors and guards. Amara sat quietly, humming in soft tones, stroking Sophia's hair, pressing small points along her wrists and temples with an instinctive precision. It wasn't science as the doctors knew it, but Sophia's body responded. The child, who had whimpered restlessly for days, finally drifted into a calm sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with more rhythm than it had in weeks. Richard's fists unclenched. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe. When Sophia stirred again, her eyelids flickering open, it wasn't with a cry of pain but with a faint smile. She whispered one word, "Stay." Amara squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Richard turned away, blinking hard. He wouldn't let anyone see his eyes mist. Not the doctors. Not the guards. And especially not this little girl who had walked in from the streets and succeeded where billions had failed. The following days blurred into a cautious rhythm. Every morning, Richard arrived tense and expectant, bracing for the worst. And every day, he found Amara already by Sophia's side, humming her lullabies, coaxing her to sip water, gently working her limbs so they didn't stiffen. At first, Richard hovered, his suspicion palpable. He expected failure, expected the illusion to shatter. But Sophia's progress, though slow, was undeniable. She began to speak in full sentences again. She laughed weakly at Amara's stories. She ate small bites when coaxed, where before she had refused everything. One evening, Richard stood in a corner of the room, arms folded, watching as Amara helped Sophia breathe through a coughing fit. "You act like you've done this before," he muttered. Amara nodded softly. "I have. My little brother." Richard's chest tightened. He hadn't expected an answer so personal. "And what happened to him?" Amara's gaze dropped. "He didn't make it. But I learned things no one taught me. I had to. And I promised myself, if I ever had another chance, I wouldn't let a child suffer like he did." Richard looked away, his throat constricting. For years, he had believed that money bought the best knowledge, the best skill. But this girl, she had learned from loss, from love. From something no money could buy. As days turned into a week, Richard found himself drawn, against his will, into Amara's world. One night, Sophia awoke crying from a nightmare. Richard rushed forward, fumbling, trying to calm her. But she only cried harder. "Stop," Amara whispered gently, laying a hand on his arm. She showed him how to lift Sophia differently, how to hum a soft rhythm instead of speaking in rushed commands. At first, Richard bristled. He wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not by a child. But as he followed her guidance, Sophia quieted in his arms. Her tiny head rested on his chest, her breathing slowing. Richard froze. He hadn't held her like this since she was a toddler. He hadn't known how. Amara smiled faintly. "See? She just needed you to stop trying to fix everything and just be with her." Richard swallowed hard, his heart cracking in ways it hadn't in years. Between treatments and lullabies, Amara told Sophia stories from her neighborhood, about Mama Ruth's cooking, about the neighbors who called her the healer girl, about the times she had turned sadness into laughter with nothing but imagination. Sophia giggled, asking for more, her weak body trembling with joy. Sometimes, Richard lingered nearby, listening. Against his instincts, he found himself speaking too. He told Sophia about his childhood, about the time he got into trouble at boarding school, about the silly nicknames his friends gave him. Amara laughed. "You mean even billionaires were once little boys who got in trouble?" Richard gave her a look, then chuckled, actually chuckled, for the first time in months. The walls between them began to crumble. The doctors still doubted. They insisted Sophia's improvements were temporary fluctuations. But Richard couldn't deny what his eyes saw. His daughter, once on death's door, was slowly coming back to life under Amara's care. One evening, as Sophia slept peacefully, Richard approached Amara. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking its usual steel. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You could have walked away. No one would have expected you to care." Amara looked at him with a calm, steady gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to lose someone you love. And because every life is worth saving, no matter who it belongs to." Richard had no reply. For once, words failed him. Sophia's color improved. Her strength flickered back in small but undeniable sparks. And each spark lit something inside Richard that had been dark for too long. Every night, he sat longer by her bed. He listened when Amara explained her small rituals. He even tried humming the lullaby himself, awkwardly at first, then with growing comfort. The billionaire and the girl from the slums, two people who should never have met, were bound together by the fragile hope of one child's survival. And slowly, impossibly, they were beginning to change each other. While Sophia rested peacefully one afternoon, Amara slipped into the hallway to catch her breath. The hospital's white walls seemed to close in around her. She reached into her worn bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a note from a neighbor who had promised to check on her grandmother. Her eyes scanned the words. Mama Ruth's cough is worse. Rent collector came again. I did what I could. Come back soon. Amara's chest tightened. She could almost hear Mama Ruth's wheeze, see her hunched figure struggling to cook in their crumbling apartment. She had promised she would help Sophia, but what if, in doing so, she lost the only family she had left? Her stomach knotted. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Please, Lord, don't let me be too late." But when she returned to Sophia's bedside and saw the girl smiling faintly, her small fingers clutching the doll Amara had made from scraps of fabric, she knew she couldn't leave. Not yet. Sophia needed her now. And Amara's heart couldn't walk away. Across the city, storm clouds gathered around Richard's empire. At a shareholders' meeting, men in tailored suits and women in sharp heels sat around a long glass table, their voices sharp and impatient. "Richard, the press is tearing you apart," one barked. "They say you've abandoned your responsibilities. Your daughter's illness is tragic," another said coldly, "but our losses are worse. You've poured billions into treatments. And now rumors spread you've brought in a street girl as her caregiver. Do you understand how that looks?" Richard's fists slammed onto the table. "I don't care how it looks. She's my daughter. If you think money matters more than her life, then you don't belong in this room." The board fell silent, but their eyes burned with disapproval. Outside, headlines flashed. Billionaire turns to child healer, desperation or madness. Investors question Anderson's stability amid daughter's illness. Richard ignored them in public, but in private, their words gnawed at him. He had built his empire on strength, control, and respect. Now he was being mocked, pitted. But every time he considered sending Amara away, he remembered Sophia's laughter returning, her small voice whispering, "Stay." And his pride bent just a little more. At night, Amara sat by Sophia's side, telling her stories of Mama Ruth. Sophia listened wide-eyed, giggling at tales of the grandmother's fierce scolding and tender love. "Do you miss her?" Sophia asked softly. Amara's smile wavered. "More than anything. She's all I have left." Richard, sitting quietly in the corner, caught the flicker of pain in Amara's eyes. For the first time, he wondered what it cost her to be here. Later, when Sophia slept, he pulled Amara aside. "Your grandmother. She's sick, isn't she?" Amara hesitated, then nodded. "She needs me." "But Sophia," she looked back at the bed, her voice breaking. "She needs me too." Richard studied her, this child who had nothing, yet gave everything. He felt a sting of shame. For all his billions, he had never given so selflessly. One stormy night, the power flickered in the hospital. Machines beeped in confusion, nurses rushed, and Sophia began coughing violently, her small body racked with tremors. Doctors flooded the room, shouting instructions. But Sophia only grew worse, her cries breaking Richard's heart into shards. Amara pushed through the crowd. "Let me," she cried. "Out of the way, child," a doctor snapped. But Richard's voice thundered, "Let her through." Amara rushed to Sophia's side, pressing her hands to the girl's chest, humming that soft, unshakable tune. Her voice rose over the chaos. Breathe with me, Sophia. In, out, in, out. Slowly, against all odds, Sophia's trembling eased. Her breathing steadied. The alarms quieted. Nurses stared. Doctors fell silent. Richard's knees buckled as relief washed over him. He buried his face in his hands, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." When he lifted his gaze again, it was not toward the doctors, but toward Amara. For the first time, his eyes held not suspicion, but respect. The next morning, a newspaper headline screamed across every newsstand. Street girl saves billionaire's daughter during night crisis. Photos of Amara circulated, her small hand on Sophia's forehead, Richard's shadow in the background. The world was divided. Some praised her as an angel. Others mocked Richard as delusional. Reporters camped outside the hospital, shouting questions. Is it true a poor child saved your daughter? Mr. Anderson, have you lost faith in real medicine? Amara, are you a miracle worker? Security pushed them back, but the noise seeped in. Richard's empire teetered further. Amara's life, once anonymous, was now under a microscope. And Sophia, fragile yet smiling, clung tighter to Amara than ever. Back in her neighborhood, Mama Ruth's cough deepened. The rent collector pounded at the door, threatening eviction. Neighbors tried to help, but their pockets were empty too. Amara's heart tore in two directions. Meanwhile, Richard faced a shareholder revolt. His advisors begged him to drop the child healer, before his credibility vanished completely. You're risking everything on her, one warned. Your fortune, your reputation, your legacy. Richard slammed the table. I don't care about any of that. I care about her. He pointed to a photo of Sophia on his phone. His voice cracked. She's all I have. Late one evening, Richard found Amara sitting alone in the hallway, her head bowed, her hands trembling as she read another note from home. He sat beside her, awkward in his expensive suit against the cheap plastic chair. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Richard said quietly, I know what it's like to lose everything that matters. Amara blinked, surprised. He continued, the world thinks I have it all. But without her, his voice faltered. Without Sophia, I have nothing. Amara swallowed hard. And without Mama Ruth, I don't know who I'd be. For the first time, the billionaire and the street girl looked at each other not as opposites, but as equals, two souls fighting for the people they loved. Sophia's health hung by a thread, her recovery fragile, uncertain. Amara's grandmother's health deteriorated with each passing day. Richard's empire trembled, shareholders circling, media ridiculing. But in the quiet of the hospital room, hope flickered. Sophia's laughter returned in small bursts. She asked for stories, for lullabies, for Amara's hand to hold as she drifted into sleep. And Richard, once hardened and proud, found himself watching in awe. Not at the machines, not at the charts, but at a child from the streets who had become the heartbeat of his daughter's fragile recovery. The stakes had never been higher. For all of them. And the world, whether ready or not, was about to witness the impossible. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within. Lightning cracked across the night sky, rain slashing against the hospital windows in furious waves. Inside Sophia's suite, alarms blared. The monitors screamed as her heart rate plummeted. Nurses rushed, doctors shouted orders, machines buzzed in desperate protest. Richard's world collapsed in a single, terrifying instant. Her heart rates dropping, one nurse cried. Prepare the defibrillator, another barked. Sophia's tiny body convulsed, wires tugging against her fragile skin. Her lips turned pale, her breath shallow, then fainter, fainter still. Richard stumbled forward, his voice breaking. Do something. Save her. The chief physician shook his head, sweat dripping down his brow. We're losing her. Her body can't fight anymore. No, no, no. Richard roared, grabbing the doctor by the collar. "You don't get to give up. Not now." But the truth hung heavy in the room. The monitors flatlined. The shrill tone filled the air like a death knell. Richard's knees buckled. He fell beside the bed, clutching his daughter's cold hand, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, the billionaire who had conquered the world wept openly, broken and helpless. "Don't take her from me," he begged. His voice cracked, raw. "Please, God, not my little girl." The doctors began pulling back, their faces grim. Nurses started disconnecting wires. One muttered, "She's gone." And then, through the silence that followed the flatline, came a voice. "No," Amara said, firm and unyielding. All eyes turned. The small girl stood at the foot of the bed, her fists clenched, her eyes blazing with determination. "She's not gone. Not while I'm here." "Child," a doctor snapped, "this isn't your place." But Richard, choking on sobs, raised his head. "Wait." His voice was hoarse, desperate. He looked at Amara, clinging to the last shred of hope. "Do it. Whatever it is you do, do it now." Amara rushed to Sophia's side, brushing past stunned nurses. She pressed her hands against the girl's chest, closing her eyes. "Come back, Sophia," she whispered. "Stay with me. Stay with your father." Her voice rose, weaving into the lullaby she had sung so many times, the tune that had once calmed her brother, the tune that had steadied Sophia's breathing before. Only this time, it was fiercer, louder, carrying a force that seemed to shake the room. In, out, in, out. Breathe with me. Her small hands pressed rhythmically, her hum vibrating like a heartbeat. At first, nothing happened. The flat line wailed on. Richard clutched the edge of the bed, his chest heaving. He couldn't watch his daughter fade again, but he couldn't look away. And then, a flicker. A faint blip on the monitor. Nurses gasped. Her heart rate's returning. Amara pressed harder, humming louder, tears streaming down her face. "That's it, Sophia. Don't stop. Come back. Come back to us." The blip turned into 2. Then 3. The flat line broke, replaced by the steady, miraculous beep of a returning heartbeat. Sophia's chest rose with a gasp, air flooding her lungs. Her eyes flew open, wide and searching. She coughed weakly, then whispered, "Daddy." Richard's body shook with relief. He grabbed her hand, clutching it as though he would never let go again. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." The room erupted. Nurses shouted in disbelief. Doctors scrambled to check vitals, their hands trembling. None of it made sense. By every rule of science, Sophia should have been gone. But she wasn't. Because of Amara. Richard turned toward the little girl, tears streaking down his face, his voice breaking. You saved her." Amara, exhausted, swayed on her feet. Her hands trembled from the effort, but her eyes still burned with quiet fire. "I just kept my promise," she whispered. Richard fell to his knees before her, the billionaire who had once towered over boardrooms now bowing before a child from the slums. His voice was hoarse, reverent. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me back my daughter." Amara shook her head softly. "Thank her. She's the one who fought to stay." But everyone in the room knew the truth, the impossible had just happened. And it was because of Amara. The storm outside had passed. Dawn broke gently over the city, light streaming through the hospital windows in soft gold. The air inside Sophia's room was different now, no longer thick with despair, but alive with something new, hope. Sophia slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Her tiny hand still clutched Amara's, refusing to let go. Richard sat beside them, his usual commanding posture gone. For the first time in years, he looked simply human. His eyes were red from tears, but they shone with a gratitude that words could not contain. When Amara stirred, he rose to his feet and faced her. His voice was quiet, trembling, but resolute. "You didn't just save my daughter," he said. "You saved me. I had forgotten what it meant to believe in something greater than money, greater than pride. You reminded me." Amara shifted nervously, her small shoulders hunched. "I only did what I promised my brother I would. I couldn't save him, but I saved her." Richard's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded document. "From today, you'll never worry about being turned away again. I'll see to your grandmother's care. Your home, your future, your education, everything you need, it's yours." Amara's eyes widened. "You do that? For me?" Richard nodded firmly. "You gave me back my daughter. No wealth in the world could repay that, but I will try." For the first time, Amara allowed herself a small smile, tired, but radiant. "Thank you." Weeks later, Sophia was stronger, walking slowly through the garden outside the hospital. Amara pushed her wheelchair when she tired, both girls giggling under the sun. Mama Ruth, now cared for in comfort thanks to Richard's promise, sat nearby, her eyes shining with pride as she watched her granddaughter. And Richard stood a few steps away, his arms folded loosely, his face soft. He was no longer the untouchable billionaire in headlines. He was just a father, grateful, humbled, changed. As the camera lingers, Richard's voice carries like a narration. Life is like a game of chess. We think power, wealth, and control are the pieces that matter. But sometimes, it's the smallest piece on the board that makes the move no one expects. Amara was that piece. Overlooked. Undervalued. Yet in the end, she changed everything. And perhaps the greatest moves in life are not the ones that build empires, but the ones that build bridges. The scene fades with Sophia and Amara laughing together, their voices echoing with hope. And then the narrator's voice adds warmly. If you believe that miracles can come from the most unexpected places, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes, the smallest hands carry the greatest power. Fade to black.